Hi fish fans! So today I have a request for a video on how to do a water change. So we're going to come and do a water change on this 10 gallon. As you can see, it's a 10 gallon quarantine tank. These guys' quarantine are almost up, but it is definitely a little stacked in here. So I do a water change almost every day on this one. It likes to run high on ammonia because I do feed a lot. I feed more than most people because I try to keep my guppies happy to keep them from eating babies, so I tend to have to do a lot of water changes. On a typical tank, for example the 55 up here, I pretty much only do water change once a week, which I do have some live bears in there, but I'm not as concerned about them breeding as my guppies. They're just more for fun, and that's a pretty community tank, if I could think of my words today. So we are going to basically do a quick water change on this, and I'm going to show you exactly how it's done. I'm going to try to be as quick as possible on it and get everything together and get kind of what you need to know. Obviously this one, as you can see, does not have gravel or sand. I do tend to gravel vac or sand vac. I actually tend to gravel vac less. Like my gravel up here, I don't really tend to gravel vac it too much. There's some Snello there, so just ignore that. That's what that is. Mainly because I have so many little critters in here. Like here's a snail, and I've got a whole bunch of stuff. Tends to eat any fallen fish food. So what I'll do is I'll actually just tend to take the gravel vac, I'm going to show you in a minute, swoosh it over the surface to kind of get the poop out. And that is pretty much all I do on that. And then down here, because it is a bare bottom, which is typical for breeder tanks, quarantine tanks, stuff like that. I don't have them on my breeder tanks simply because I like pretty sand. That tank up there is my only gravel tank. I actually prefer sand because all you have to do is swoosh over the surface and you get everything, and it's super easy. But this one's a bare bottom because it's just a quarantine tank, so it doesn't matter if it's ugly. It's actually, I can kind of zoom out, it is actually below the stand in the tank. It was a sump for a saltwater tank a long time ago, and I changed it. So really what you need for a water change is you're going to need a bucket. As you can see, just have a bucket down here. Regular, this is an old saltwater bucket, just clear, empty bucket. And you will need a gravel vac. And also, I don't have it with me at the present moment, you will need something to fill it back up with. I just use a gallon jug, which we'll see here in just a little bit. So this is a gravel vac. I definitely recommend one if you don't have one. They are amazing and they help you out a lot. So you're just simply going to put one end in here, and then let's see if I can do this one-handed. I might have to pause it for a second. Hopefully I don't drop my apple in there. That would be bad. So I'm just kind of going to get it in here. This one is really hard to do because normally how a gravel vac works is gravity does it for you. And this one is super tough because, as you can see, it is not higher than the tube. So I kind of have to shove the tube down in there a lot to get it to work. And so you kind of need it to suction, and you'll see it'll be swooshing stuff around down there. That's how you know. And you can also see stuff get sucked up in there. So I just kind of swoosh it around in the bottom, get as much of the poop up as you can. Obviously watch for your fish. If you have babies, you definitely don't want to use an unprotected suction because this will suck babies right up. Even these guppies are crazy, they like to go up in it. So what you want to do is put a pantyhose over the kind of intake or some sort of mesh netting that's fine enough that you won't suck babies up or shrimp up if you have shrimp. Obviously, if you have snails, you want to watch where you gravel sucking, that kind of thing. But I pretty much just swoosh around in here. You want to make sure you get all of this up. Now this one also in particular is extremely slow because the gravitational force just isn't quite there as it is like when I do the top tank. It's super fast. It drains fast. This one kind of has a not as good of a suction, and it's slower because it's lower, so the gravity isn't as great. The difference in it, the vacuum suction science stuff, isn't as great. So again, just kind of sucking all the poop out. Any kind of excess stuff you can get, the better. Now this does have a little bit of sand in here because when I first, I try to use a gravel vac per tank. Mainly because I try to never cross-contaminate my tanks, because a very long time ago I had a problem with columnaris, and I accidentally used a gravel vac from one tank to another tank and didn't realize that I had columnaris until it was too late. And so that gravel vac, because I used it for 2, it actually ended up contaminating my other tank too, and it was just a horrible mess. I just literally, like, I'm the world. I just shoved that out of the way. I'm never super easy on sponge filters. The main thing, look, and that happens all the time too if you have like plants. They get sucked up in there. I just pick them out, basically. And so I think we've got a pretty good amount of the poop. Let's move that out of the way. And just kind of keep sucking it. As you can see, these guys are fairly used to it by now. They've been with me about a week and a half, 2 weeks, so they're kind of used to me constantly being in here sucking out. That big girl right there, she actually went up in there yesterday. It was pretty funny. So we just suck it out. Now, this is about as good as we get. And as you can see, it's kind of about, I don't fill mine all the way up. It was actually only about right here. So we sucked out maybe 20% of the water or so. So for this one, because it's high in nitrates, I will probably suck just a little more out. And I just kind of wait. As you can see, I don't turn off sponge filter. The only thing I will turn off is the heater if I do it real low. And this tank actually isn't even running a heater right now because it's so warm in my house. It doesn't really need one. But if I do have a heater, you definitely never want to run a heater with exposed air, ever. It'll crack the glass a lot. So I'll turn my heater off, but for the most part, I don't turn sponge filters off. They're just air pumping down into it. It'll be fine. And as you can see, it's filling up. We've got all the nasty poop in there. And we'll just kind of let this settle down. And then what I do is I just carry this out my front door and dump it in my yard. You get real strong real fast if you do the bucket method. There are Python siphons where you hook them up to your faucet unit, and you can basically siphon the water out, and you can also add the water back in without ever having to carry a bucket. I've done it before. I have it. I don't use it right now personally because, one, I feel like it wastes a lot of water, and two, a lot of my tanks have shrimp, snails, and babies in them, and if I do suck one up, I want to be able to look down in the bucket to make sure that I don't have anything in there. Obviously for this tank we don't have to worry about it, but for my other tanks, most of my other tanks I do, so I just kind of do the old bucket method. You get real strong arms. And you gotta watch this. She will go up in there. We gotta watch her. But pretty much just get the poop. I'm gonna take it down just a teensy bit more. I'm gonna basically take it down where it's touching the top of the bubble thing, and then we'll go from there. So again, you pick up the siphon, which I think is probably around $10 at Walmart or somewhere like that. Definitely saves you a lot. Again, if you have babies or if you're afraid of sucking up shrimp, You can just throw a pantyhose over it, it'll work the same. You want to angle it kind of up like I did, and I'll show you again here in just a minute. So obviously I can't restart this, it's too low now to restart, but I'll kind of show you a little bit of what I did. As soon as you break the suction, all the water is going to come out. But when you do it, a lot of people make the mistake of they kind of go like this and then they try to scoop and go back down. You actually want to always keep it kind of pointed a little bit up. Go in, let it fill up, raise it up so that it starts to kind of suck down the tube. When it gets about halfway, what I do is I just stick it back in the water. You want to make sure it's kind of tilted up though, not down. Otherwise the suction won't form. That's kind of the big thing. People are like, oh, it's so frustrating. But as long as you keep it kind of stacked up, you'll be fine. So then what I do is I just kind of take this. Sorry, my dogs are all over the place. They're like, play with me, play with me. I don't care, you're shooting a video. And then I just kind of pull this out. Trying to do this one-handed, and then let it run out, and then I just make it ugly for just a second here. I will just loop this around, and then I just stick it under my fish cabinet. That's where mine stays. So now we have the tank. Almost did it upside down. So now we have the tank at about, I'd probably say about 30-40% down. This is a 5-gallon bucket, so if you fill it up, it's about 5 gallons. So, and also for the bucket, I always recommend white, by the way. Red or blue, I have a blue bucket, it's horrible. You can't really see, like as you can see on this one, it is very easy to see if there are little fish fry or something down there on the white. So always do the white. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to cover us up, and I'm going to go over to my kitchen sink, and we will meet back there in just a moment, and I will show you what I do with the water. So obviously you got to fill this back up. I use a pitcher. You can use kind of whatever you have around the house. I just like the 1-gallon pitcher because I know how much gallons it is, and I use Prime. And essentially with the Prime, it's 1 milliliter per gallon, so I know to always chuck a milliliter in there. So let's go over there. We'll be right back, fish fams. So I just have it covered so you guys can't see my messy house. Grabbing the pitcher. I don't put anything in my water except for Prime, mainly because my water out of the tap is about 7.2. My water in the tanks are about 8, between 7.6 and 8, depending on the tank. So I don't tend to put anything else. I just have Prime. I definitely recommend Prime because it does actually work quite well to get rid of chloramines in the water, especially if you have city water. You definitely want to get rid of those chloramines, because they basically break down into ammonia, and it adds a bunch of extra ammonia, and it's just not good for the fish, and yada yada yada. Also helps with nitrites. I've actually tested it before, and I have safely been able to say that it does help if a nitrite spike happens. Actually, on that 10-gallon you just saw, I started it the day that I got the fish, which is terrible. I know, but it happens. And so I kind of set it up and put him in there because I wasn't really expecting to get fish, but the guy had a great deal going on, so I went ahead and got him. And we had a nitrite spike about a week ago, to where nitrites, like, it was purple, it was high nitrites, and I actually did the 5 times amount of Prime that it says to, and the next day nitrites were 0, and they've been 0 pretty much since then. So it does work for helping with nitrite spikes. It helps lock ammonia. It helps lock chloramines away. Now I will say sometimes when you use Prime, it can still show that there is ammonia and stuff in the water, especially ammonia. Because again, it doesn't completely remove the ammonia, it just locks it away. Makes it a little safer for the fish until your cycle breaks it down. So even if you do use it, you still see ammonia. You might, but it definitely does work, and it's probably the best that I can recommend. So we have that. This is an eyedropper. I 100% recommend getting one. You can see it's just a 1 milliliter eyedropper. It saves you a lot. Before I was guesstimating, and I used to waste so much of it, and I would go through it so fast. This is 500 milliliter, which should treat 500 gallons. So obviously if you have 30-gallon tanks, it can last you a while, something like that. I've got 5 tanks, so I go through it pretty regularly, but it's not too bad. And then you've got your regular, just gallon, and excuse my counter, I got some Fruit Loops in the background there. But you got your regular gallon, just kind of pitcher. And then I personally use this. You can use any sort of bubble and air stone that you want. You don't have to do this. I personally have to do it because our water is that bad that if I don't aerate the water for 5 to 10 minutes, my fish flash every single time I do a water change. So I just aerate it literally for 5-10 minutes with the prime in it, and then it is good to go. They don't flash after that. So I always have to aerate. You do not have to aerate necessarily. You just give it like 1 to 2 minutes non-aerated with the prime in it. Should be good to go. The other main thing is you want to make sure that your water is around the same temperature as what you have in the tank. So if my water is 80 degrees, I want to make sure that the water I put in the tank is close to 80 as possible. And that's mainly because sudden changes in temperature can actually shock fish. So you want to make sure that it is around the same. I have a digital thermometer for that, which I actually don't have in here at the moment. However, the fish that are in there are room temperature. So basically I know where to set it to get room temperature, and then it sets for 10 minutes. So it'll be around room temperature, they'll be fine. But certainly that big tank that you saw up, that's runs at 78 to 80. And so I tend to get my digital thermometer and I'll put it in the water stream and then put it in the thing to make sure like it's the same and all that. Digital thermometers are pretty cheap. I think I got mine off Amazon for like, I think it was $5 or $6. Love it. It's just a black thermometer basically, and it's got a little temperature dipper, and you dip it in there and then it digitally reads it and tells you what it is. 100% recommend it. Now, if you have you always want to make sure you test your tap water. And if your tap water is supremely different than the water you're putting in the tank, like I have one tank that's 8 pH, and this is about, my tap tends to run about 7.2, some days 7.4. So if it's drastically different, you can try to put pH up in it or pH down or neutral regulator. Honestly, I never change more than 25% of my water unless I absolutely have to. Like ammonia's, I'll change like 30 is where I like to keep like max 30 to 40. Sudden changes in pH and sudden changes in temperature and sudden changes in some other different levels like GHK, stuff like that, can affect your tank. So you want to make sure that you always test your tap water as well. A lot of people won't. Also, sometimes tap water straight out of the tap registers really high on ammonia, and then you want to make sure that you use prime. So always test your tap water as well as your tank water too, which a lot of people don't think to do, but that's another tip that I definitely would suggest. And so I'm going to very quickly set you down because I don't think I can get the prime one-handed because it's pretty low. So I'm just going to get the prime real quick and get the water in, and then we'll kind of go back and I'll talk to you while I'm doing it. So again, I just get 1 milliliter eye drop, which I'll kind of show you here. I just fill it up. We've got it full. I just squirt it in, literally. And then let me grab the water for us. And again, I'm just going to let it run for just a second so it's not super cold, because again, you don't want to put really different temperature in there. It can really affect your fish. You don't want to do that. So we're going to go ahead, and that feels about room temperature. We're just going to fill it up. And again, I'm not going to show you guys this, I'm sorry. It is literally just filling the pitcher. But it is way too hard to do one-handed. Especially because my sink's kind of dirty. I'm trying not to show you. I got a couple dirty dishes in there. You know how it is. So I'm trying not to show you that. but you definitely just want to kind of fill it up. And I always try to do, if you do one or the other, like if you do have room temperature water, I always try to go a couple degrees over if you're going to let it sit, because a couple degrees over will drop in temperature a lot faster than a couple degrees colder will warm up. So I literally have just filled it to the brim there. And then this, what I have here, which I didn't really explain, is actually a battery powered air pump. And I have them for emergencies. I have like 4 or 5 of them for emergencies, which is good because we recently actually had a tornado and power went out for 3 days. And these saved my life. I 100% recommend them. I got them at Walmart actually. But if you open it up, it just takes 2 batteries. And they run 44 hours is what they say. I can go ahead and tell you I've been running this one a lot longer than 44 hours. And then I just take my little air tube and I drop it in there. And I let mine kind of do this. Like I said, you don't have to do this part. I just personally let mine do this for 5 to 10 minutes because my water is not that great. And I want to make sure the purpose of the aeration basically is it just moves the water around and the prime in the water. Just kind of make sure, and really helps get rid of some of that ammonia and chloramines. So I do it for mine simply because my fish hate my water otherwise. You can do an RO unit if you really want. They're not super expensive. You can probably find one for like 100, 120. That's a pretty good one. I just personally don't, because my water is bad enough that it's going to take hours to do it, to make certain gallons, and I just don't have time for that, if I'm being honest. I don't want to have to sit around, and I don't really have a place to put like a trash can or a big bucket to store my water in, so it like continually makes it, and then I like have, you know, a trash can full of water and I can draw from that. I don't have anywhere for that because I do have a fiance who isn't as into fish as I am, and I'm trying not to make him super horribly angry. He's pretty understanding of my hobby, but I think a trash can full of water might be a little much in the house. Again, as I told you guys before, I do not have a fish room. I do not operate in a fish room. I have a fish house. My fish tanks are all over my house. I live on a crawl space. So with a crawl space, you have to make sure that you evenly distribute weight on beams, otherwise they will break if it's too heavy. So I don't have a fish rack or anything like that. We just literally have fish tanks all over our house. So it would have to just be like a trash can in the living room, and I'm pretty sure that probably wouldn't fly. So this is how I do it, but certainly there are various other ways, and how I do it is not necessarily the best way. Again, you might have good enough water, you can just plop the prime in and go. I do suggest at least letting it sit for just a minute before you put it in, but some people put prime in their fish tank and then just pour the water in the fish tank, and they're perfectly fine. So it's really up to you as to how you want to do it, but this is definitely how I aerate. And then what I do is I just take this and I go pour it in the fish tank, set up another one, wait another 5 to 10 minutes, go pour it in the fish tank. The time also helps me a little bit because, again, with the thing changing too quickly, if you pour it all in at once, it changes really, really fast. Whereas if I kind of do it over an hour, it's a little easier, that kind of thing. Normally what I do is I change all 5 fish tanks the same day, and I will rotate. Like I'll do a 5-minute, go take it to one, do a 5-minute, take it to the other one, and just rotate through. So they're getting like a bucket every, 25 minutes as opposed to every 5 minutes. If I'm being honest, a lot of times I get lost on Facebook, and even though the thing beeps, I don't come get the water. So it tends to take longer than 20-25 minutes to fill a tank anyway for me because I get distracted. So I do water changes on Wednesdays and Sundays and sometimes Fridays, depending on if I'm feeling really into water changes that week. For problem tanks like this one that's overstocked, I will do it every day or every other day, or at least every 3 days. Typically if I wait 3 days on this tank, the ammonia is almost near 1, which is is a testament to how hardy the fish are. But I will change, but again, for big tanks that are super well established, like that 55 I showed you has been running for 7 years. That one I could really honestly get away with just once a week. Sometimes even people do once every 2 weeks. That's kind of virgin on it for me. Because really you're doing a water change mainly to get the nitrates out of your tank. So monitor your nitrates and then pull it out as needed. Which I have a tank that actually runs really high on nitrates, and I definitely try to do that one 3 times a week. Just because it's always a little bit higher. It has a lot less plants in it than other ones. And that is pretty much all of the information I can think of. If you guys can think of anything else that you want to know or any questions you have, definitely let me know. And I will get back to you in a message, or I'll make a video on it, and hopefully we can get you guys going. So that is how I water change. I hope it was informational for you. I hope you can use some of the information I did. Definitely, as always, at the end of my videos, I am not the world's best fish expert, but I do have 28 years of experience, and this is what works for me. So I hope it works for you too, and I hope you have a wonderful week, fish fans. Alright, bye.